Welcome to another episode of the Jampack Report, today for February the 1st of 2021. Where did January go, you may be asking? How is it February, someone says. Indeed, I have no idea. And these are the questions I ponder, as it's a raw 37 degrees and raining outside. I loathe this time of year. But today, this isn't a weather podcast, this is a daily gaming news podcast, bringing you the hottest news you need to know from around the industry, right here on YouTube and on podcast services around the world 5 days a week. It's your one-stop shop for everything you need to know. So if you enjoy the show and you like what you see, hit that subscribe button and keep coming back for more. Now, with that being said, I do have one piece of housekeeping to bring to you all today. A bonus video is going up today, February 1st at 12 Eastern Time, and that is a review of Habroxia 2. Very excited to share my thoughts on this one. The team at Lilymo Games reached out, provided a code, and I've been playing their old school space shooter over the course of the past few weeks. Definitely looking forward to that video going up so you guys can get a gist of what's coming when it launches later this week. Of course, it was also the headliner for yesterday's episode of The Drop. If you do want to see the rundown before the game launches, excited to dig into that. But on top of that, let's go ahead and dive into the biggest gaming news of the weekend, kicking everything off with the Amazon story from Bloomberg. A new deep dive from Jason Schreier has showed that Amazon spends $500 million per year on its game division without a single game to really show for it. Now, that $500 million on gaming does not include spend on Twitch or even its cloud gaming service Amazon Luna. Now, many in the interview pointed the finger at Mike Frazzini, head of the games division and a longtime Amazonian who dates all the way back to the beginning of the company. He essentially expects every game to be one of those $100 million AAA winners without listening to the experienced game developers and executives that Amazon has poached from other gaming giants like Take-Two, Valve, and Ubisoft. On top of that, those interviewed complain that the Lumberyard engine is difficult to work with, there's no incentivization for employees, and there's a dangerous bro culture that is constantly cultivated behind the scenes. This is a very big problem, and I would highly recommend heading over to Bloomberg and reading that entire deep dive from Jason Schreier, who has been on fire lately, by the way. I have been critical of Jason in the past because of the kind of air that he brings sometimes, but man, these last two stories that he has done are phenomenal. Very fantastic reporting here. But the biggest problem here, outside of the dangerous bro culture, of course, is the lack of a single game. $500 million per year and there isn't a single game to show for it? That blows my mind. Now, of course, there are games to show for it, but they've all been canceled, including the most recent cancellation, Crucible, and that's probably the game that many of you are thinking about. Now, essentially, Crucible was launched in early access. In fact, it might have even been a beta, and so ultimately, it was rescinded. They pulled back the game after it was launched because it was incomplete, and on top of that, they just didn't have any players. So they've spent millions and millions and millions of dollars, and no one's even playing the game they did put out, so instead of letting it die with grace, they just unreleased it. Is that even possible? Apparently, they're blazing the trail over there. But this is going to continue because Amazon has limitless money to spend. There is no object right now, and of course they do have a couple of games in the works, one of which is a Lord of the Rings game that is going to supposedly align with a TV show that is, again, supposedly releasing this spring after being delayed from last fall. Still don't think that's going to happen. We've seen nothing about it. But any game that is in development behind the scenes seems to be just thrown together. It seems to be something that is poorly managed, and there are plenty of issues going on over there at Amazon. But the deep dive from Jason Schreier is phenomenal. Again, highly recommend you give it a look. But a company is only as good as the leadership that it brings to the table, whether that's a game development company, whether that's a McDonald's franchise, whether that's a small business. Somebody has to have drive. Somebody has to know what they're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, you had better hire people that do. Now, Amazon did get that far, and they hired a lot of big names from the gaming industry to come in and help them and guide their path towards success because they have the funds and they have the talent, but now no one's really listening to the talent and they're just blowing all of the funds. Again, this is just an insider report. No one was named in the article specifically, but it does include 30 employees that have both worked and continue to work at the company. So, very interesting stuff to dig into there if you do want some light reading on your Monday morning. But they've got to make some changes because really, this is getting ridiculous. It's time to release a game. They've got to put something out because otherwise, somebody at Amazon has to look and say, we've spent, let's say $200 million on nothing. Or I'm sorry, $2 million. The math doesn't even add up in my head. That's how big this number is. But something's got to change because, man, it's getting wild out here. However, I'll tell you what is making money. The Medium. Because The Medium has recouped development cost just 3 days after its release, including not only the development cost, but on top of that, the promotional cost of the game. Of course, for those that have not heard of The Medium, it launched last week, and it has been a very, very fun ride for me. It came out on January 28th, and so there you have it. It's been an incredible success. Now, it is on Game Pass, and so it's unclear how all of that factors into its success, but if you haven't checked out gameplay or you have not dived in for yourself, the game is out on Xbox Series X, S, and PC. And that's one of the most significant things about the game, is that it is the first big console exclusive for next gen on Xbox, and that is a very big factor here. This is kind of a historical game, if you will. Now, in terms of gameplay, I thought that it was going to be something similar to a Control. I try these days to go into a game blind. I don't do too much research. I don't check out gameplay. I like to have a fresh experience, and that's one of the reasons that I don't really stream my games. I want to go in and really take it for what it is and get into the core gameplay itself. And so the more that I get into it, the more I realize that this isn't really a Control style game at all. This is like an old school Resident Evil / Silent Hill game. And I wasn't expecting it, but I'm very happy that that's what it turned out to be. I'm deeply enjoying The Medium. It has a lot of little scary points in it. It's not a horror game. I mean, it is, but it's not one of those that makes my skin crawl. However, there are points that it does that. It's a really fun time, and I'm definitely getting into it. But of course, this is from Bloober Team. They're most well known for games like Layers of Fear, Observer, and Blair Witch, and so they continue to pump out some pretty high quality stuff. Now, I'm going to echo what Vicious696 said on the Kinda Funny Xcast. This is a AA game in my mind. This isn't really your AAA highest of quality experiences, and this is not your indie game either. It's somewhere in the middle. In a roundabout way, this is something I would expect THQ to publish. It's that kind of thing. And so ultimately, when it comes down to it, The Medium is certainly one to check out. But the big news here this morning is that it has recouped development cost completely. And so that just goes to show how excited people are for the next generation. And on top of that, how good Game Pass is actually doing. And this is the ultimate Game Pass game. It truly is, because I would not have picked up The Medium if it was not on Game Pass. Not because I'm not interested in the game or that I don't think it's a good game, but it's just not something I would normally spend my money on. I'm more of a shooter kind of guy, I'm more of a puzzle game kind of guy, I'm more of an arcade kind of guy. This doesn't really tick any of those boxes. But it's expanding my horizons. I'm playing a game that I never would have played, and I'm really enjoying it. And that, my friends, is the beauty of Game Pass. So if you want to dive in, again, The Medium is out now on Xbox Series X, S, and PC, and it brings some very interesting gameplay mechanics to the table that are certainly keeping me engaged, and I'm excited to continue playing the game throughout the rest of the week. But now let's talk about this Warner Bros. Story, because Warner Bros. Is trying to patent Shadow of Mordor's Nemesis system. Now, originally filed in 2016, Warner Bros. Is trying to patent the Nemesis system in Shadow of Mordor and its follow-up Shadow of War. Enemies in the game essentially remember when you do something, building a history that transfers through the game, and it creates a true sense of backstory that I've been unable to find in another game since, truly. Now, after getting shot down in November of 2019, Warner Bros. Continues to persist and essentially got a notice of allowance in October of 2020, meaning the company may very well be successful in their search for a patent. Now, Obsidian director Josh Sawyer took to Twitter to share his thoughts, which I do want to echo here, and he writes, quote, "Somehow I missed that WB patented the Nemesis system. LMAO, what a load of shit. If you take someone's design and make a better version of it, you should be given a trophy and a triumph through the streets, and the people who made the previous version should applaud you and say, wow, that was really cool. Like, I didn't want to before, but this actually makes me want a Nemesis variant because this is so stupid." I agree. I agree completely and wholeheartedly with what Josh Sawyer has to say here. Warner Bros. Is trying to patent a gameplay concept. In a way, this is like the Fine Bros trying to patent React. You can't just patent human behavior. Now, I understand the deeper story behind all of the React stuff, and I understand where Warner Bros. Is coming from with this, but a Nemesis system is important for a variety of games, and it's something that could be an innovation industry-wide. And at the cadence Warner Bros. Is releasing games, you gotta let other people use that concept, man. Come on. I mean, are you going to have a Nemesis system in Hogwarts Legacy when it launches? What are you doing with this? The only game that it's really applicable in right now is Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War. Now, I could see the Nemesis system coming in through a Gotham Knights or a Birds of Prey. That could be very neat. But I do think that this is something that should be deeply, deeply reconsidered by Warner Bros. Unless they license out the concept of a Nemesis system, because I would love to see this kind of thing come to Assassin's Creed. I had hoped that's what would happen in Valhalla. That just feels like such a good fit. On top of that, Far Cry. Any open-world Ubisoft game, really, could use a good Nemesis system, but it's very unfortunate to see Warner Bros. Going this route, and I really do agree with Josh Sawyer here, saying that this is, quote-unquote, a load of shit. Not a big fan of this one at all, just not really following that in the slightest. But to round out today's show, let's end on a good note, shall we? MLB The Show is probably coming to Xbox this year, according to some covers that were leaked on Instagram. Now, this Instagram post does show a leaked cover of this year's entry in the industry's #1 baseball game, now apparently breaking its history and launching on Xbox as well. Now, this has been in the works for a long time. An announcement was made in 2019 that the game could come to other platforms as soon as 2021, with PlayStation Studios pivoting to open up their console exclusivity and then release games on PC and elsewhere. Of course, we've seen Horizon Zero Dawn come to PC, Death Stranding come to PC, and now we are seeing The Show 21 come to Xbox as well. Now, on top of this Instagram leak, a Jackie Robinson edition was also found on Reddit that supposedly confirms the game is not only coming to just PlayStation and Xbox, but also we're talking about PlayStation 5, PS4, Xbox Series X and S, and the Xbox One, so the full console lineup, instead of just the screenshot that shows the Xbox One cover here on Instagram. Now, the Jackie Robinson edition also nets 4 days of early access starting on April the 16th, which does bring many to conclude the game is going to be launching on Friday, April the 21st. Now, none of this is confirmed by any stretch of the imagination, so don't mince my words. This is not something that is officially out there right now. But it looks like it's something that is going to be made official very, very shortly. If this cover art is already on the way, then I'm assuming that it's probably going to be released in the coming weeks, because we are getting much closer to that April release date, which now is the time when the marketing machine begins to churn. Things begin to move. It's getting very close to the release of this game. Overall, fantastic move, and I said this back in 2019, and I'll say it again today. This is good for the gaming industry. No other baseball game comes close. MLB The Show has been the go-to baseball game, and it undoubtedly has sold PlayStation consoles. But if the game does go multi-platform, it essentially opens up so many new sales opportunities for PlayStation that more baseball fans have Xboxes than baseball fans that would be willing to go out and buy a PlayStation. You see my thought process here. So you can probably, and I would put a pretty good bet on this, make more money by opening the game up on the Xbox ecosystem, and hey, who knows, maybe in the future even Switch or something like that. But as long as you open up the ecosystem, you can make more money on selling additional copies than you could on selling additional PlayStation consoles for those that are hardcore baseball fans and do want the game to come regardless of their cost. They have to go out and buy a console. I think that bringing it to Xbox is a great move. And on top of that, I like this Jackie Robinson Foundation edition, if this is in fact legitimate, and it does very much so look legitimate because you have this kind of tear design in the back behind the player themselves, and it looks like it's all echoing the same kind of sentiment here. But will I dive into it? Nah, probably not. Still not a big baseball guy, regardless of platform. I never really played the show on PlayStation, just never really did tickle my fancy. But I know a lot of people are going to be looking forward to this one, so now it looks like this year you'll be able to dive in on PlayStation or Xbox and play your baseball game. But that rounds out today's episode of the Jampack Report. If you enjoyed today's show, drop me a like down below and let me know what stories caught your eye, but specifically, what do you think about Amazon? Will they ever make a legitimately good game? What do you think about their upcoming open world Lord of the Rings MMO style experience? Do you think that's going to be good? And how do you feel about $500 million per year going in without anything coming out? Would love to hear your thoughts. But until tomorrow, you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. I'll talk to you soon, and peace.